When Nora Ellis receives an unexpected invitation to the elite Westwood masquerade, she walks into the ballroom as a joke, meant to be seen and laughed at. But by midnight, she's the one no one can stop watching. And everything is about to change. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun beat down on the aging plantation-style mansion that sat like a fading memory on the outskirts of Willow Creek. The white columns had yellowed with time, and the paint peeled in places, but the Westwood name still carried weight. In this small southern town, Graham Westwood III stood at the window of his father's study, swirling bourbon in a crystal glass despite the early hour. At 38, his handsome face was beginning to show signs of the bitterness he carried inside. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his clothes expensive but casual, the uniform of a man who never had to try too hard. "Another party, Graham? Really?" His Aunt Eugenia's voice cut through the quiet room. She was the last of the old guard, a Westwood by blood, who believed in the family legacy more than Graham ever had. Graham turned, his smile practiced and hollow. "What else is there to do around here, Aunt Jeannie? Besides, my birthday is the perfect excuse to remind everyone that we still exist." "The Westwood name doesn't need reminding," she sniffed, adjusting her pearl necklace. "It's you who seems to forget what it means." Graham drained his glass. "What it means? A house we can barely afford to keep, stories about the good old days that weren't good for everyone, and drinks with people who only show up because they're curious about how far we've fallen." He laughed without humor. "Some legacy." Eugenia's face hardened. "Your father would be ashamed." "My father was always ashamed," Graham replied, pouring another drink. "At least I'm honest about who I am." Outside, through the window, a slender figure moved across the garden, carrying cleaning supplies toward the main house. Nora Ellis walked with her eyes down, her movements efficient. At 34, she had worked at the Westwood estate for 7 years, ever since Graham's father had hired her. She kept to herself, did her work well, and lived quietly in the small guest house with her 10-year-old son, Marcus. Graham watched her for a moment, then turned away. People like Nora were part of the background of his life, necessary but invisible. In the kitchen, Nora worked quietly, wiping down counters that gleamed from her regular care. The house was beautiful, even in its decline. Sometimes she wondered what it would be like to live in these rooms instead of just cleaning them. "Mum!" Marcus burst through the back door, his backpack bouncing. "I got an A on my science project." Nora's face lit up with a smile that transformed her serious features. "That's wonderful, baby. I knew you could do it." She pulled him into a hug, careful not to get cleaning solution on his school clothes. "The teacher said I could be a scientist someday if I keep working hard," Marcus said, his eyes bright with possibility. "You can be anything you want," Nora told him, meaning every word. It was why she studied nursing textbooks late into the night after Marcus went to bed. It was why she worked so hard at a job where people looked through her rather than at her. The sound of laughter drifted in from the front of the house. Graham's friends had arrived early, as they often did, ready to start drinking and planning the next meaningless event. "Go on to the guest house and start your homework," Nora told Marcus. "I'll be done in an hour." As Marcus left, Charles Bentley, one of Graham's oldest friends, wandered into the kitchen looking for ice. His eyes landed on Nora with mild surprise, as if he'd forgotten there were people who worked in the house. "Oh, hello there," he said, with the overly friendly tone people used when they couldn't remember your name. "Hello, Mr. Bentley," Nora replied politely, continuing her work. Charles leaned against the counter, watching her. "You know Graham's throwing quite the birthday bash next weekend. Masquerade theme, very exclusive." Nora nodded, not looking up. "Yes, sir, I'll be preparing the house." Charles chuckled, the sound holding something unpleasant. "No, I mean it's quite the guest list. Everyone who's anyone in 3 counties. He paused. Must be strange working in a place like this, but never being part of it. Before Nora could respond, Graham appeared in the doorway. "Charles, we're waiting for you." "Did you get lost looking for the ice?" Charles straightened up, grinning. "Just chatting with your housekeeper. What's your name again, honey?" "Nora," she said quietly. "Nora Ellis." Graham barely glanced at her. "Well, Nora can get back to her work, and you can rejoin the party." He gestured toward the living room with his glass. As they left, Nora heard Charles say, "You know what would be hilarious? If you invited her to your fancy party." Their voices faded, but the idea lingered in the air like a dangerous promise. 3. Days later, an envelope appeared in Nora's mailbox at the guest house. Inside was a formal invitation to Graham Westwood's 39th birthday masquerade gala. For a moment, she stared at it in confusion. It had to be a mistake. That evening, as she dusted the library, she heard Graham and his friends planning the party, their voices carrying from the living room. "I can't believe you actually sent her an invitation," a woman's voice said, laughing. "What if she shows up?" "She won't," Graham replied confidently. "And if she does, well, that's part of the entertainment, isn't it? The help trying to blend in at a Westwood party." Cruel laughter followed his words. Nora stood frozen, the duster in her hand, as the truth washed over her. It wasn't a mistake. It was a joke. She was the joke. She slipped out of the library unseen and walked back to the guest house, the invitation burning in her pocket. Marcus was at the table working on math homework. He looked up and immediately noticed her expression. "Mom, what's wrong?" Nora shook her head, forcing a smile. "Nothing. Baby, just tired." She sat down beside him, helping with a division problem, but her mind was elsewhere. After Marcus went to bed, she took out the invitation again. She should throw it away. She should pretend she never received it. But something else stirred. Inside her, a quiet defiance that had been building for years. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she rarely called. "Jasmine? It's Nora. I need a favor." The night of the party arrived, and the Westwood mansion glowed with lights. Cars lined the circular driveway, and guests in elaborate masks and formal wear streamed into the grand ballroom that had once hosted the most prestigious events in the county. Graham stood near the bar, already feeling bored despite the party. Just beginning. He wore a simple black mask that did little to disguise his identity. Everyone knew who he was, the last Westwood man, clinging to a fading legacy. "Quite the turnout," Charles said, appearing at his side with 2 drinks. "Though, I notice your special guest hasn't arrived," Graham smirked. "Did you really think she would? People know their place." Charles shrugged. "Pity. It would have livened things up." Just then a hush fell over the entrance to the ballroom. Graham turned, curious about what had caused the sudden quiet. A woman stood in the doorway, wearing a simple but stunning silver dress that caught the light with every movement. Her dark curls were swept up elegantly, with a few tendrils framing her face. A delicate silver mask covered her eyes, but there was no mistaking who she was. Nora had come to the party. Graham felt his drink nearly slip from his fingers. She looked nothing like the quiet housekeeper who moved through his home like a shadow. This woman stood tall, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. As whispers spread through the room, Nora walked forward, moving with a grace that seemed to come from somewhere, deep inside. She didn't look at Graham or his friends. She simply entered the space as if she had every right to be there, because she did. She had been invited. "Well, I'll be damned," Charles muttered. "She actually came." Graham couldn't respond. Something unexpected was happening in his chest, a tightening that felt like shame mixed with something else he couldn't name. Across the room, an older couple stepped forward to greet Nora. Dr. James Wilson and his wife had always been kind to her when they visited the estate. They welcomed her now, drawing her into conversation as if her presence was the most natural thing in the world. Others followed their lead. Curiosity, if nothing else, pulled people toward her. And when she smiled or laughed, genuinely, not with the forced politeness she used while working, people were drawn to the warmth of it. Graham watched, stunned, as the woman he had invited as a cruel joke became the center of a growing circle of guests. People he'd known all his life seemed more interested in Nora Ellis than in him at his own birthday party. "This backfired spectacularly," Charles commented, seemingly impressed. "Who knew the help could clean up so well?" "Stop calling her that," Graham snapped, surprising himself as much as Charles. Charles raised an eyebrow. "Touchy, aren't we? It was your idea." Graham moved away from the bar, driven by an impulse he didn't understand. He approached the circle where Nora stood talking with Mrs. Wilson. As he neared, Nora looked up and met his eyes directly for the first time in 7 years of working in his home. There was no anger in her gaze, no accusation, just a calm assessment. That made him feel suddenly small. "Mr. Westwood," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "Thank you for the invitation." Around them, conversations faltered as people sensed the tension. "You're welcome," Graham said, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "I'm glad you could come." Nora's expression didn't change, but something flashed in her eyes, knowledge of exactly what the invitation had meant. "It was my pleasure. I've worked in this ballroom many times. It's nice to see it from a different perspective." The simple truth of her statement hung in the air between them. For 7 years she had polished these floors, dusted these chandeliers, prepared this room for parties she was never meant to attend. Graham felt a flush creep up his neck. "Would you like a drink?" he offered, not knowing what else to say. "No, thank you," Nora replied. "But don't let me keep you from your guests." She turned back to Mrs. Wilson, effectively dismissing him at his own party. As Graham walked away, he felt dozens of eyes on him. The joke had turned, and somehow he was. Now the punchline. The party continued into the night. Nora moved through it carefully, never staying too long with any group, never calling attention to herself. Yet attention found her anyway. There was something about her quiet confidence that people responded to, a genuineness that stood out. In a room full of practiced smiles, Graham watched her from a distance, unable to look away for long. He drank more than he should have, trying to drown the unfamiliar feeling in his chest. Near midnight, he found himself alone on the terrace, needing a break from the noise and the curious glances. He didn't hear the door open behind him. "Your aunt is looking for you," Nora's voice came quietly. "It's time for the birthday toast." Graham turned, surprised to find her there. "Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "You didn't have to come tonight." Nora looked at him steadily. "No, I didn't." Then, "Why did you?" She was silent for a moment, considering her answer. "Because for once I wanted to be seen," she finally said. "Not as someone who cleans your house or serves your guests, but as a person." She smiled slightly, even if it was meant as a joke. The simple honesty of her words struck him with unexpected force. How long had she worked for him, moving through his life unnoticed? How many times had he looked past her rather than at her? It was wrong, he admitted, the words surprising him as much as they seemed to surprise her. The invitation. It was cruel, and I'm sorry. Nora's expression softened slightly. "I should go. Marcus is waiting for me at home." "Your son," Graham said, realizing he knew almost nothing about her life. "He must be 10 now?" "Yes," she replied, a genuine smile touching her lips at the mention of her child. "He's very smart, wants to be a scientist." Before Graham could respond, the terrace door opened again and Aunt Eugenia appeared, her face tight with disapproval. "Graham, everyone is waiting," she said sharply, her eyes darting between him and Nora. Then to Nora, "I believe your services won't be needed until tomorrow morning." The dismissal was clear. Nora nodded politely, her face returning to the careful mask she always wore at work. "Good night, Mrs. Westwood, Mr. Westwood." She slipped past Eugenia and back into the ballroom. "What are you thinking?" Eugenia hissed once Nora was gone. "People are talking." "Let them talk," Graham replied, a strange restlessness building inside him. For once they're saying something interesting. He returned to the party and gave the expected speech, thanking everyone for coming. But his eyes kept searching the room for a silver dress that was no longer there. Nora had gone home, back to her real life. But something had changed. For the first time, Graham Westwood couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had always been right in front of him, invisible until tonight. In the guest house, Nora hung up the borrowed silver dress carefully. Marcus was asleep on the couch, having tried to wait up for her. She gently covered him with a blanket, her heart full of love for this boy who was her whole world. "How was it?" her friend Jasmine texted. Nora stared at the phone, unsure how to answer. Finally she typed, "I was seen. It was enough, she told herself. For one night she had been more than invisible. She had been Nora Ellis, a woman in a silver dress standing in a room where people like her had once only been allowed to serve. Tomorrow, she would return to being the housekeeper. But something had shifted inside her too. She couldn't go back to being invisible. Not completely, not ever again. The morning after the party, Nora arrived at the main house earlier than usual. The ballroom was a disaster. Empty glasses abandoned on every surface, food trays picked clean, confetti and dropped masks scattered across the floor. It would take all day to restore order. She tied her hair back, put on her work gloves, and began collecting glasses. This was familiar territory, cleaning up after the wealthy had fun, yet something felt different. She moved with a new awareness, her back a little straighter, her eyes no longer downcast. "Good morning?" Nora turned to find Graham standing in the doorway, looking rumpled and tired. It was unusual to see him awake this early, especially after a party. "Good morning, Mr. Westwood," she replied evenly, returning to her work. Graham shifted uncomfortably. "You don't have to clean all this yourself. I can call a service." "This is my job," Nora said simply. "I've handled bigger messes." He stepped further into the room. "About last night, we don't need to talk about it," she interrupted, not unkindly but firmly. "It was just one night. Today things go back to normal." Graham frowned. "What if I don't want them to?" The question hung in the air between them. Nora stopped working and looked at him directly, the way she had at the party. "What exactly are you saying, Mr. Westwood?" Before he could answer, Aunt Eugenia's voice cut through the moment. "Graham, there you are. We need to discuss the property. Taxes. They're due next week." Graham reluctantly turned away. "I'll be right there, Aunt Jeannie." As he left, he glanced back at Nora. Something passed between them, a question without words. Then he was gone, and Nora returned to the glasses, the confetti, the evidence of a world she had briefly touched but did not belong to. 2 days later, Graham found himself standing outside the guest house, hesitating. He'd never visited Nora's home before, had barely acknowledged it existed on his property. But after the party, after seeing her differently, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He knocked on the door before he could change his mind. Marcus answered, his young face curious. "Hello?" "Hi there," Graham said, suddenly awkward. "Is your mother home?" "She's studying," Marcus replied. "Who are you?" The question caught Graham off guard. This boy had lived on his property for years, yet they'd never properly met. "I'm Graham Westwood. I own the big house." Recognition dawned on Marcus's face. "Oh, Mum's boss." From inside, Nora's voice called out, "Marcus, who's at the door?" She appeared behind her son, textbooks spread out on the small dining table behind her. Surprise registered on her face when she saw Graham. "Mr. Westwood, is something wrong at the house?" "No, nothing's wrong," Graham said quickly. I wanted to talk to you." He glanced at Marcus. "If it's not a bad time." Nora hesitated, then nodded. "Marcus, finish your reading while I speak with Mr. Westwood." She stepped outside, closing the door partway behind her. The small porch held 2 chairs and a pot of carefully tended flowers. She didn't invite him to sit. "What can I do for you?" she asked, her tone professional. Graham suddenly felt foolish. What was he doing here? "I saw the light on and thought I'd check that everything was okay with the guest house. Any repairs needed?" It was a thin excuse, and they both knew it. "Everything's fine," Nora replied. "Is that all?" "No," Graham admitted. "I wanted to apologize again properly for the invitation. It was meant to be a joke, but it was at your expense, and that was wrong." Nora studied him for a moment. "Thank you for saying that." "You were studying," Graham said, nodding toward the house. "What are you studying for?" A flicker of surprise crossed her face at his interest. "Nursing. I take online courses at night." "That's impressive," he said sincerely. "How long have you been doing that?" 3 years, Nora replied. "I should finish next year if all goes well." Graham felt a stab of shame. 3 years she'd been working toward this goal while living on his property, and he'd never known, never asked, never shown the slightest interest in her life. "Is that what you've always wanted to do?" he asked. The question seemed to catch her off guard. Yes, she said after a moment. I want to help people, and I want Marcus to see that it's never too late to follow your dreams. From inside, Marcus called, "Mom, I'm done with chapter 3. Nora smiled, her whole face softening. I should go back inside. Of course, Graham nodded. Thank you for talking with me. As he walked back to the main house, Graham felt a strange sense of emptiness. The guest house had been warm and lived in, filled with books and schoolwork and the evidence of real lives being built. His own massive home suddenly seemed hollow by comparison. The following week, Nora arrived at work to find a large box on the kitchen counter with her name on it. Inside was a set of expensive nursing textbooks, newer editions than the worn second-hand copies she had been using. There was no note, but she knew who they were from. She set the books aside, unsure how to feel about the gesture. On one hand, it was thoughtful. On the other, she didn't want charity, especially not from the man who had invited her to his party as a joke. When Graham entered the kitchen later that morning, Nora was preparing a shopping list for the week. "Did you find the books?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes," she replied. "Thank you, but I can't accept them." Graham frowned. "Why not?" "Because I've worked hard for everything I have," Nora said simply. "Even if it's not much. The books I have are worn, but they're mine. I earned them." Graham hadn't expected this response. "I was just trying to help." "I know," Nora acknowledged, "and that's new for you, so I appreciate the thought. But if you really want to help, there are better ways." "Like what?" Graham asked. Genuinely curious. Nora considered for a moment. "Marcus loves science, but the school doesn't have a proper lab. They need equipment, microscopes especially. That would help not just him, but all the kids in his class." Graham nodded slowly. "I could do that." "It would mean a lot to those children," Nora said. She paused, then added quietly, "More than expensive. Gifts mean to me." The gentle rebuke stung, but Graham knew she was right. He'd taken the easy way out, throwing money at a situation instead of making a real effort to understand what she needed. "I'll look into it," he promised. "And Nora, I am sorry about the party." "You already apologized," she reminded him. "Yes, but I'm not sure you believed me," Graham said. "I'm not sure I believed myself, but I am sorry not just for the invitation, but for 7 years of not seeing you." For the first time, a genuine smile touched Nora's lips. "Well, you're seeing me now, Mr. Westwood. Better late than never." 2 weeks later, Marcus burst into the guest house, his eyes wide with excitement. Mom, you won't believe what happened at school today." Nora looked up from her nursing notes. "What is it, baby?" "We got new microscopes, 10 of them, and test tubes and slides and real lab coats." Marcus's words tumbled out in a rush. "Principal Johnson said they were donated by the Westwood family. That's your boss, right? The man who came to our door?" Nora felt a surge of surprise. She'd expected perhaps 1 or 2 microscopes, not a complete lab setup. "Yes, that's right." "But why would he do that?" Marcus asked, his young face puzzled. "He doesn't even know me." Nora thought carefully about her answer. "Sometimes people surprise you. Maybe he wanted to do something good for the community." Later that evening, as Marcus worked happily on his science homework, Nora walked up to the main house. It was past her working hours, but she knew Graham would be in his study where he spent most evenings. She knocked lightly on the open door. Graham looked up from his laptop, surprise crossing his face when he saw her. "Nora, is everything all right?" "Yes," she said, stepping into the room. "I wanted to thank you for what you did for Marcus's school. He's thrilled." Graham smiled, and for once it reached his eyes. "It wasn't much. Their science program needed updating." "It was generous," Nora corrected him, "and thoughtful. You listened to what I said." "It felt good," Graham admitted, "to do something useful with the Westwood. Money for a change instead of just throwing parties." Nora studied him for a moment. "You know, I've worked for you for 7 years, but I feel like I'm just meeting you now." "I think you are," Graham said quietly. "I'm not sure who I was before." The honesty in his voice touched something in Nora. She nodded toward his laptop. "I should let you get back to work. I just wanted to say thank you." As she turned to leave, Graham called after her, "Nora, would you and Marcus like to have dinner sometime? Here, at the house, not as my employees, but as guests." The invitation hung in the air between them, nothing like the cruel joke of the masquerade party. This was something new, something real. "I'd like that," Nora said after a moment, "and I think Marcus would too." The dinner was set for Friday evening. Aunt Eugenia was away visiting friends, so it would be just the three of them. Nora wore a simple blue dress, not borrowed but her own, and helped Marcus tuck in his shirt properly. "Why are we having dinner with your boss?" he asked, fidgeting with his collar. "Because he invited us," Nora replied, "and it's polite to accept invitations from nice people." Marcus looked skeptical. "Is he nice?" "The kids at school say the Westwoods think they're better than everyone else. People are more complicated than that," Nora said carefully. "Sometimes they just need a chance to show who they really are." When they arrived at the main house, Graham answered the door himself instead of having Nora use her key. It was a small gesture but meaningful. Tonight she wasn't the housekeeper. "Welcome," he said, looking nervous in a way Nora had never seen before. "Come in." Marcus stared around at the grand entryway with wide eyes. He'd never been inside the main house before. "This place is huge," he exclaimed. "Do you live here all by yourself?" Graham laughed. "Most of the time. It's too big for one person, really." "Then why don't you move?" Marcus asked with the direct curiosity of a child. "Marcus," Nora warned gently. "No, it's a fair question," Graham said. "The truth is, this house has been in my family for generations. I thought I had to stay here to honor that legacy, but lately I've been wondering if there might be better ways to honor where I come from." He led them through to the dining room, where he'd set the table himself. It wasn't perfect. The napkins were folded awkwardly, and the silverware didn't quite match, but the effort was evident. "I made dinner," Graham announced, sounding both proud and worried. "Nothing fancy, just spaghetti. I hope that's okay." "Spaghetti is my favorite," Marcus said, his face lighting up. "Mine too," Graham replied with a genuine smile. As they sat down to eat, Nora watched the interaction between Graham and Marcus with growing surprise. Graham asked Marcus about school, about science, about his friends, and he listened to the answers with real interest. He was relaxed and open in a way she'd never seen before, without the bitter edge he usually carried. "Mr. Westwood says I can come see his mother's old garden tomorrow," Marcus told Nora excitedly as they ate. "He says there are plants from all over the world there." "It's overgrown now," Graham explained. "No one's tended it properly since my mother died, but the bones of it are still there. I thought Marcus might enjoy seeing it, with his interest in science." "That's very kind," Nora said, touched by his thoughtfulness. After dinner, Graham surprised them both by producing a board game. "I found this in the attic. My father and I used to play it when I was about Marcus's age." For the next hour, they sat in the living room playing Monopoly, laughing and talking as if they had known each other for years instead of days. Nora felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest, a warmth, a connection she hadn't expected. When it was time to leave, Graham walked them back to the guest house under a sky full of stars. "Thank you for coming," he said as they reached the door. "It's been a long time since this house had anything resembling a family dinner." "We had a great time," Nora replied sincerely. "Didn't we, Marcus?" "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "Your spaghetti was almost as good as Mom's," Graham laughed. "High praise indeed." As Marcus went inside, Graham hesitated, then asked Nora, "Could we do this again?" In the moonlight, his face looked different, open, hopeful, without the cynical mask he usually wore. Nora felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble. "Yes," she said softly. "I'd like that." Word spread quickly around Willow Creek that Graham Westwood was spending time with his housekeeper and her son. Some people whispered about scandal, others about redemption. Charles Bentley showed up unannounced one afternoon, finding Graham helping Marcus build a model volcano on the patio. "What's all this?" Charles asked, his face a mixture of amusement and confusion. "Science project," Graham replied simply. "Marcus is teaching me about volcanic eruptions." Charles raised an eyebrow. "I see. And where's the lovely Nora today?" "Studying for her nursing exams," Graham said, his tone making it clear the subject wasn't open for discussion. Later, after Marcus had gone to show his mother the completed project, Charles confronted Graham directly. What are you doing, Graham? Playing house with the help? Is this some kind of midlife crisis? Graham's face hardened. Don't call her that, and it's none of your business, Charles. Of course it's my business. We've been friends since we were kids. I'm worried about you. Charles lowered his voice. You invite her to your party as a joke, and now you're what, dating her? People are talking. Let them talk, Graham said firmly. For once in my life, I'm getting to know someone real, someone who doesn't care about the Westwood name or money or any of it. Do you know what Nora said when I tried to buy her expensive textbooks? She turned them down, said she'd worked for everything she had. He shook his head in wonder. When was the last time anyone in our circle turned down something expensive? Charles sighed. Just be careful. Eugenia will have a fit when she finds out. And what about Nora? Do you really think someone like her fits into your world? Maybe it's time my world changed, Graham replied quietly. After Charles left, Graham walked through the empty rooms of his ancestral home, seeing it through new eyes. The faded grandeur, the hollow echoes of past glory, none of it felt important anymore. Not compared to the simple warmth of a family dinner or the pride in Marcus's eyes when he completed his model volcano. He found himself at the window, looking out toward the guest house where light glowed in the windows. Nora was there, building a real life with hard work and determination, while he had been sleepwalking through his days, clinging to a name that meant less and less. For the first time, Graham wondered if he could change, truly change, into someone worthy of being part of their world, rather than expecting them to fit into his. Aunt Eugenia returned from her trip the following week. She found Graham in the garden, clearing weeds from his mother's long-neglected flower beds. "What on earth are you doing?" she demanded, watching. Him work with dirty hands and a sweaty brow. "Gardening," Graham replied without looking up. "Mum loved these roses. I thought it was time someone took care of them again." Eugenia frowned. "We can hire a gardener for that. You're a Westwood." "Being a Westwood doesn't mean I can't work with my hands," Graham said, sitting back on his heels. "Maybe that's been our problem all along." "Our problem," Eugenia said tightly, "is that we're running out of money while you throw expensive parties and play games with the housekeeper's son instead of focusing on family business." Graham stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "Marcus. His name is Marcus, and he's a great kid. His mother is working toward a nursing degree while cleaning our house and raising him alone. They have dreams, Aunt Jeannie, real ones, not just memories of what used to be." Eugenia's face paled. "So the rumors are true. You're involved with that woman." "Her name is Nora," Graham said firmly. "And yes, I care about her. I care about both of them." "This stops now," Eugenia hissed. "Your father would be turning in his grave. A Westwood does not mix with the help." Graham felt a flash of anger. "My father is the one who hired Nora. He respected her. And I'm beginning to think he was a better man than I gave him credit for." "You're risking everything," Eugenia warned. "Our standing in this community, our legacy—" "Legacy?" Graham interrupted. "What legacy, Aunt Jeannie? A big house we can barely afford? A family name that reminds everyone of a time when people like Nora weren't allowed through the front door? Maybe it's time for a new legacy." He walked past her, back toward the house, leaving her speechless among the newly tended roses. Inside, he found Nora in the kitchen, preparing to leave for the day. Her face was troubled. "I heard," she said quietly. "Your aunt wasn't exactly being subtle." Graham sighed. "I'm sorry about that." "Don't be," Nora replied. "She's not wrong. We come from different worlds, Graham. This thing between us, whatever it is, it was never going to be simple." "I don't want simple," Graham said, stepping closer to her. "I want real. And what I feel when I'm with you and Marcus is the most real thing I've experienced in years." Nora looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and caution. "People will talk. They already are. It could make things difficult for Marcus at school." "Then we'll face that together," Graham said. He reached for her hand hesitantly. "If that's what you want to." Nora looked down at their joined hands, hers strong from years of work, his now marked with garden soil. "I never expected this," she admitted softly. "When I came to that party in the silver dress, I just wanted to be seen. I never thought—" "Neither did I," Graham said. "But here we are." For a moment, They stood in silence, the air between them, charged with possibility. Then from outside came the sound of Marcus calling for his mother. "I should go," Nora said, gently withdrawing her hand. "We'll talk more tomorrow." As she left, Graham felt both fear and exhilaration. The walls he had built around himself were crumbling, leaving him vulnerable but strangely free. Whatever came next, there was no going back to the man he had been before Nora walked into his party, wearing that silver dress. In the guest house, Nora found Marcus waiting with his homework spread across the table. "Mum, can we have dinner with Mr. Westwood again soon?" he asked eagerly. Nora smiled, touching her son's hair gently. "I think so, baby. I think so." Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising change. Inside, in both houses, hope bloomed like flowers in a long-neglected garden. The rumors about Graham and Nora spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. At the country club, people whispered behind their hands. At Marcus's school, children repeated things they'd heard their parents say. Even at the supermarket, Nora noticed the curious glances and sudden silences when she walked by. "Just ignore them," her friend Jasmine advised as they shopped for groceries. "People always talk when they don't understand something." "What don't they understand?" Nora asked, selecting tomatoes with careful hands. Jasmine gave her a knowing look. "A wealthy white man from old money spending time with a hard-working black single mother. In this town, that's like a real-life soap opera to them." Nora sighed. "We're just friends. Are you?" Jasmine challenged gently. "Because I've known you for years, and I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at him now." Nora couldn't deny it. Something had changed between her and Graham since the night of the party. What had started as an apology had grown into genuine friendship, and now there were feelings she wasn't sure what to do with. "It's complicated," she said finally. "Love usually is," Jasmine replied with a smile. At the Westwood estate, Graham was facing his own battle. Aunt Eugenia had called a family meeting, which meant herself, Graham, and their lawyer, Jonathan Porter. "The Westwood Trust has specific provisions," Jonathan explained, looking uncomfortable as he spread papers across the study desk. "Your father was quite traditional in his views on family matters." "What exactly are you saying?" Graham asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. Eugenia cut in. "If you continue this inappropriate relationship, you risk losing control of the family assets. The trust can be redirected to other branches of the family if the primary heir acts in ways that bring dishonor to the Westwood name." Graham stared at her in disbelief. "That's archaic. And who decides what brings dishonor?" "The trustees," Jonathan said quietly, "which currently means your aunt." Graham felt anger rising in his chest. "So you're threatening to cut me off if I don't stop seeing Nora?" "I'm trying to protect our family legacy," Eugenia insisted. "Your father would have wanted—" "Don't tell me what my father would have wanted," Graham interrupted, his voice hard. "He's not here. I am. And I'm tired of living my life according to rules made by dead men." He stood up, towering over the desk. "Do what you have to do, Aunt Jeannie. I'll do the same." As he stormed out, Jonathan called after him, "Graham, please be reasonable. We're talking about your inheritance." Graham paused at the door. "Maybe it's time I made something of my own." That evening, Graham walked to the guest house, his mind churning with thoughts. Nora answered his knock, surprise crossing her face. When she saw his expression, "What's wrong?" she asked, stepping outside. "Family drama," he replied with a humorless laugh. "The usual Westwood nonsense." He told her about the meeting, the trust, his aunt's threats. Nora listened quietly, her face growing troubled. "Graham," she said when he finished, "I don't want to be the reason you lose your inheritance." "It's not your fault," he insisted. "It's a broken system that needs to change. Besides, I'm 39 years old. Maybe it's time I found out who I am without the Westwood fortune." Nora shook her head. "This is serious. Your aunt is right about one thing. People are talking. At the grocery store today, a woman I've known for years pretended not to see me. Marcus came home upset because some kids at school were saying things." She trailed off, not wanting to repeat the cruel words. Graham's face darkened. What things? It doesn't matter, Nora said firmly. What matters is that this isn't just affecting you and me, it's affecting Marcus, and I won't have my son hurt because of what's happening between us. So what are you saying? Graham asked, a cold fear gripping his heart. Nora took a deep breath. I'm saying maybe we need to take a step back. Maybe this is moving too fast. Nora, please, I need to think about Marcus first, she interrupted gently. He's everything to me. Graham wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. Marcus had to come first. I understand, he said finally. But Nora, I'm not giving up. Not on you. Not on us. She smiled sadly. Sometimes it's not about giving up. It's about facing reality. As Graham walked back to the main house, rain began to fall, matching his mood. He had finally found something real, something that mattered, and now it was slipping away because of old prejudices and an outdated legacy. Inside the dark house, he made a decision. If the Westwood name was the problem, then maybe it was time for a change. The next morning, Graham surprised everyone by calling a press conference at the Westwood estate. Local reporters gathered in the front garden, curious about what the famously private heir had to announce. Aunt Eugenia cornered him in the hallway before he went out. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Making a change," Graham replied calmly. "You might want to watch." Outside, under the shade of ancient oak trees, Graham faced the cameras. From a distance, Nora watched from the kitchen window, her heart pounding with uncertainty. "Thank you for coming," Graham began. "The Westwood family has been part of this community for generations. Our name is on buildings, roads, even this land we're standing on. But today I want to talk about the future, not the past." He took a deep breath. For too long, the Westwood legacy has been about exclusion, about who belongs and who doesn't. That ends today. I'm announcing that I'm converting the Westwood estate into a community center and educational facility. Gasps and murmurs spread through the small crowd. The main house will become a library and learning center, with a focus on local history, all of it, not just the parts my ancestors wanted told. The grounds will be open to the public as gardens and recreational space. He paused, letting his words sink in. "And yes, I'm moving out. It's time for new beginnings." Questions erupted from the reporters. Graham answered them calmly, explaining that he would be establishing a trust to maintain the property, separate from the family fortune. When asked where he would go, he simply said, "Somewhere smaller, somewhere real." From the kitchen window, Nora watched with wide eyes. This was not what she had expected. She had thought he might apologize publicly for the gossip, or announce he was going away for a while. Not this. Not giving up his home, his heritage. After the reporters left, Graham found Nora waiting for him in the study. "Why did you do that?" she asked without preamble. "Because it was the right thing to do," Graham replied simply. "This house has been a museum to the past for too long. It should belong to everyone now." "But it's your home," Nora protested. Graham shook his head. "It's never really been a home. Not to me." He stepped closer to her. "Nora, when I'm with you and Marcus, I feel like I belong somewhere for the first time in my life. That's home. Not these walls, not this name." Nora felt tears stinging her eyes. "You can't just throw everything away because of me." "I'm not throwing anything away," Graham insisted. "I'm building something new, something better." He took her hands in his. "I know you need to think of Marcus first. I respect that. But I'm asking you to give us a chance. Not the Westwood heir and his housekeeper. Just Graham and Nora, two people trying to find something real in this world." Before Nora could respond, the door burst open and Aunt Eugenia stormed in, her face flushed with anger. "Have you lost your mind?" she demanded. "Turning our family home into a common library?" "Your father would be appalled." "My father is gone," Graham said firmly, "and I think he'd understand better than you know." Eugenia's gaze fell on Nora, and her eyes narrowed. "This is your doing. You've turned his head with your manipulation." "That's enough," Graham said sharply. "Nora has done nothing wrong. If anything, she's tried to be the voice of reason while I've been figuring things out." "Figuring things out?" Eugenia scoffed. "You're throwing away centuries of family tradition for a cleaning woman." Nora straightened her back. meeting Eugenia's glare with quiet dignity. "Mrs. Westwood, I've never asked Graham for anything. Not money, not position, not even attention. All I've ever done is my job and try to build a good life for my son." "Convenient story," Eugenia sneered. "It's the truth," Nora replied calmly. "And if you knew your nephew at all, you'd know he makes his own decisions. No one turns his head or manipulates him. He does what he believes is right." Graham looked at Nora with surprise and admiration. Even now, facing Eugenia's anger, she was defending him, standing tall with the same quiet strength she'd shown at the masquerade party. "Aunt Jeannie," Graham said, turning to his aunt, "the decision is made. The papers are signed. The Westwood estate will become public property by the end of the month." Eugenia's face paled. "And the family trust?" "You can do whatever you want with it," Graham replied. "Keep it. Redirect it to cousins we barely know. I don't care anymore. I have enough saved to start over." "You'll regret this," Eugenia said, her voice shaking with emotion. "When she leaves you with nothing, you'll regret throwing away your birthright." With that, she turned and left, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floors. In the silence that followed, Nora looked at Graham with wonder. "Did you really sign the papers already?" "Yes," he admitted. "Last night after we talked, I couldn't sleep, so I called my lawyer, not the family lawyer, my own guy. We drew up the paperwork, and I signed it this morning before the press conference." "But where will you go?" Nora asked. Graham smiled slightly. "I bought a small house on Maple Street, 3 bedrooms, a decent yard, nothing fancy. But it's mine, not the Westwood heirs, just mine." Nora didn't know what to say. The magnitude of what he had done, giving up his ancestral home, risking his inheritance, starting over, was overwhelming. "You don't have to decide anything now," Graham said gently, sensing her thoughts. "I'm not asking you to uproot your life or Marcus's. I just wanted you to know that I'm serious about change, about being someone worthy of you both." News of Graham's announcement spread quickly through Willow Creek. Reactions were mixed. Some praised his generosity. Others whispered about scandal and family disgrace. But for once, Graham didn't care what people thought. He felt lighter than he had in years. For the next 2 weeks, he worked tirelessly, meeting with community leaders about the transition of the estate, packing his personal belongings, and preparing for his move to the house on Maple Street. Nora watched it all with a mixture of admiration and worry. She continued her work at the main house, now with an uncertain future. Once the estate became a community center, would she still have a job? Would she and Marcus need to move from the guest house? Graham assured her they could stay as long as they needed, but Nora knew things had to change. The question was how, and when Marcus, meanwhile, had become Graham's enthusiastic helper, excited by the flurry of activity and change, he followed Graham around the estate, asking questions about what would happen to each room, offering suggestions for the new library. "The ballroom could be where kids do science experiments," he proposed one afternoon as they sorted through books in the study. "With tables and microscopes and stuff," Graham laughed. "That's a great idea. I'll add it to the plans." For all the upheaval, these were happy days, days of purpose and meaning. Graham found himself looking forward to mornings for the first time in years. He had something to build, something that mattered. And then there was Nora. Though she had asked for space, there were moments, shared smiles across a room, conversations that lingered longer than necessary, the brush of hands as they passed each other in the hallway. Small moments that held the promise of something more. One evening, as a summer storm rolled in, Graham was working late in the study when the lights flickered and went out. Thunder crashed outside, and rain pelted against the windows. He lit candles, and was about to head upstairs when he heard a knock at the back door. Opening it, he found Nora and Marcus on the doorstep, soaked from the rain. "The guest house is leaking," Nora explained, water dripping from her hair. "The old roof finally gave out." Come in," Graham said quickly, ushering them inside. "Let me get you some towels." Soon they were settled in the kitchen, mugs of hot chocolate warming their hands as the storm raged outside. Marcus's eyes were heavy with sleep, his head nodding as he fought to stay awake. "He can use one of the guest rooms," Graham offered. "There are plenty." Nora hesitated, then nodded. "Just for tonight until the storm passes." Graham led them upstairs, showing Marcus to a comfortable room that had once belonged to Graham's younger cousin during family visits. The boy crawled into the big bed, asleep almost before his head hit the pillow. In the hallway, Nora smiled at Graham. "Thank you for this." "You never have to thank me," Graham said softly. "Not for basic kindness." They stood in silence for a moment, the candlelight casting warm shadows on their faces. There was something intimate about being in the darkened house together, something that made the walls between them seem thinner. "I should get to bed too," Nora said finally. Graham showed her to another guest room just down the hall from Marcus. "If you need anything, my room is at the end of the corridor." As he turned to leave, Nora called his name. "Graham?" He looked back. "Yes?" "What you're doing with the estate, it's a good thing, an important thing." She smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "I'm proud of you." Those simple words meant more to Graham than all the praise he'd ever received. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That means everything, coming from you." The storm continued through the night and into the next day, making it impossible to repair the guest house roof immediately. Graham insisted that Nora and Marcus stay in the main house until it could be fixed. "There's plenty of room," he pointed out, "and it's silly for you to try to stay somewhere with a leaking roof when there are dozens of dry bedrooms here." Nora reluctantly agreed, and what was meant to be one night turned into 3 as the rain persisted and roof repairs were delayed. Those 3 days changed everything. Living under the same roof, sharing meals, helping Marcus with homework in the evenings, they began to feel like a family. Not the formal, distant family Graham had grown up in, but something warm and real. On the 3rd evening after Marcus had gone to bed, Graham and Nora sat on the covered porch, watching the rain and talking quietly. "When I was little," Nora said, "my grandmother used to say that rain washes away the old and makes way for new growth. I always loved that idea." Graham nodded. "It feels right, doesn't it? All this change happening during a storm." "Are you scared?" Nora asked suddenly. "About giving up everything familiar?" Graham considered the question. "I thought I would be, but honestly, I've never felt more alive. It's like I've been sleepwalking for years, and now I'm finally awake." He turned to look at her, his eyes sincere in the soft porch light. "What about you? Are you scared?" Nora's gaze met his. "Yes," she admitted, "but not of change. I'm scared of hoping for too much, of believing in something that might not last." "What we have is real, Nora," Graham said softly. "It's not going to disappear with the rain." "How can you be so sure?" she asked. "We come from different worlds. The things you're used to—" "I don't want the things I'm used to," Graham interrupted gently. "That's the whole point. I want something new, something honest. I want quiet dinners and board games with Marcus. I want to hear about your nursing, studies, and help you prepare for exams. I want mornings where we drink coffee together before starting the day." He reached for her hand, and this time Nora didn't pull away. "I want a life with meaning, Nora, and I've found that with you." Zati, rain drummed on the porch roof, creating a cocoon of sound around them. In that moment, the outside world with all its judgments and expectations seemed very far away. Nora looked down at their joined hands. "When I came to your party in that silver dress, I never imagined we'd end up here." "Life's funny that way," Graham said with a smile. "Sometimes the best things happen when we least expect them." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Graham leaned closer. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, sweet and brief, but filled with promise. When they separated, Nora's eyes remained closed for a moment, as if savoring the feeling. Then she looked at him with a mixture of joy and nervousness. "I should check on Marcus," she said softly. Graham nodded, understanding. "Of course." As she stood to go inside, she paused and looked back at him. "Graham, I'm glad I came to the party that night." "So am I," he replied. "More than you'll ever know." The next morning, the sun finally broke through the clouds. Graham woke early and went downstairs to find Marcus already in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes. "Need some help?" Graham offered, surveying the flour-covered counters with amusement. "Mom's still sleeping," Marcus explained. "I wanted to surprise her with breakfast." "That's a great idea," Graham said, rolling up his sleeves. Let's do it, together. By the time Nora came downstairs, they had managed to produce a stack of slightly misshapen but edible pancakes, along with orange juice and coffee. "What's all this?" she asked, smiling at the sight of them working together in the kitchen. "Breakfast," Marcus announced proudly. "Graham showed me how to flip them without making a mess. Well, without making more of a mess." They sat down to eat together, the morning sun streaming through the windows, turning everything golden. Graham looked around the table at Marcus's animated face and Nora's gentle smile and thought, This is what I've been missing. After breakfast, as Marcus went to get dressed, Graham received a call from the contractor about the guest house. "Roof, they can start repairs today," he told Nora, "but it will take at least a week to fix properly and check for water damage." Nora nodded. "We can manage. Maybe we can stay with Jasmine for a few days." "Or you could stay here," Graham suggested, "until the roof is fixed. You and Marcus." Nora hesitated. "Graham, I don't know." "It's just practical," he assured her, though they both knew it was more than that. Why disrupt Marcus's routine more than necessary? He seems comfortable here. Before Nora could answer, the doorbell rang. Graham went to answer it, expecting the roof contractor. Instead, he found Charles Bentley on the doorstep, looking uncomfortable. "Graham, we need to talk." "Can it wait?" Graham asked, not wanting to lose the peaceful morning. Charles shook his head. "It's about your aunt. She's not taking your announcement well. She's talking about contesting the transfer of the estate, claiming you're not of sound mind." Graham sighed. "Let her try. The papers are solid." "It's more than that," Charles warned. "She's been talking to people, important people, making insinuations about you and Nora that could hurt both of you." Graham felt a flash of anger. What kind of insinuations? Charles looked past him to where Nora had appeared in the hallway. The kind that could cost Nora her nursing certification before she even gets it. The kind that could affect Marcus at school. She wouldn't, Graham began, but he knew better. Aunt Eugenia would do whatever she thought necessary to protect the Westwood name. Nora stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "What exactly is she saying?" Charles looked uncomfortable. "That your relationship with Graham isn't appropriate. That you might be taking advantage of his position. That kind of thing." "That's ridiculous," Graham snapped. "I know that," Charles surprised him by saying. "Look, I wasn't sure about all this at first, but I've seen how you've changed, Graham. For the better. You're happier than I've seen you in years." He turned to Nora. "And I know you're not the type to use anyone. You've always been too proud for that." "Then why are you here?" Graham asked. "To warn you," Charles said simply. "Eugenia is serious. She's calling in favors, talking to the hospital board where Nora hopes to work, even speaking to the school. Superintendent, you need to be prepared." After Charles left, Graham and Nora stood in the hallway, the bright morning suddenly darker. "She can't hurt us," Graham insisted. "Not if we stand together." But Nora's face was troubled. "Graham, I can't risk my nursing certification. It's everything I've worked for, and if she's talking to the school, then we'll fight her," Graham said firmly. "Together. I'm not giving up on us, Nora. Not now that I've found you." Nora looked up at him, her eyes full of uncertainty and hope. "You really think we can win against someone like your aunt?" "I know we can," Graham replied, taking her hands in his. "Because what we have is real. And in the end, that's stronger than any old name or legacy." Outside, the sun continued to shine, the storm clouds finally gone. But a new storm was brewing, one that would test their newfound happiness and force them both to decide what they were willing to fight for. As they stood together in the hallway of the house that had seen generations of Westwoods come and go, Graham made a silent promise. This time he wouldn't let go of what mattered. This time he would stand and fight, not for the Westwood name, but for the family he had found with Nora and Marcus. And Nora, looking into his eyes, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, some dreams were worth the risk after all. The next few weeks tested Graham and Nora in ways they hadn't imagined. True to Charles's warning, Aunt Eugenia had begun a quiet campaign against them, calling in favors from old family connections and whispering rumors throughout Willow Creek. Nora felt the effects almost immediately. The nursing program administrator called her in for a routine review of her academic standing. Though nothing was said directly, the message was clear. Her relationship with Graham Westwood had drawn unwanted attention. At Marcus's school, things were even worse. Children could be cruel, repeating things they heard at home without understanding the meaning. Marcus came home one day with tears in his eyes, asking Nora why other kids were saying his mum was only with Mr. Westwood for his money. "That's not true," Nora assured him, pulling him close. "You know that's not true, right?" Marcus nodded against her shoulder. "I told them you were together because you love each other. Is that right, Mum?" The question caught Nora off guard. She and Graham hadn't used that word yet, though what they felt for each other had grown stronger with each passing day. "It's complicated, baby," she said carefully. "But Graham and I care about each other very much, and we both care about you." That evening, when Graham came to check on them at the guest house, the roof now repaired, Nora told him about Marcus's day. At school, Graham's face darkened with anger. "This has gone too far. I'll talk to the principal tomorrow." "And say what?" Nora asked. "That your aunt is spreading rumors about us? That will only make things worse." "Then what do we do?" Graham demanded, pacing the small living room. "I won't let them hurt you and Marcus. I won't let them turn what we have into something ugly." Nora watched him, seeing the frustration and protectiveness in his eyes. This was a different Graham than the bitter, cynical man who had invited her to his party as a joke. This man would fight for them, would give up everything for them. The realization both warmed and frightened her. "Maybe," she began hesitantly, "maybe we need to give it some time, let the gossip die down." Graham stopped pacing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that until the estate transfer is complete, until your aunt can't use the Westwood name as a weapon anymore, maybe we should be more discreet." The words tasted bitter in her mouth, but she forced herself to continue. "For Marcus's sake, for all our sakes. You want us to hide?" Graham asked, hurt evident in his voice. "Not hide," Nora corrected gently. "Just step back a little. Give people less to talk about until the dust settles." Graham sat down beside her, taking her hands in his. "Nora, I've spent my whole life caring too much about what other people think. I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to pretend that you and Marcus aren't the most important people in my world." His sincerity touched her deeply. "I don't want that either," she admitted, "but I need to protect my son and my future." She squeezed his hands. "It's just for a little while, until your aunt realizes she can't win." Graham was quiet for a long moment. "If that's what you need, then that's what we'll do," he said finally. "But Nora, don't doubt for a second how I feel about you, about both of you." As he stood to leave, Nora followed him to the door. "Graham," he turned back to her, and she reached up to touch his face gently. "What Marcus said to the kids at school, about us loving each other. I told him it was complicated, but the truth is," she took a deep breath, "the truth is I do love you. I didn't expect it, and I tried not to let it happen. But I do." Graham's face softened, his eyes filling with emotion. "I love you too, Nora. More than I've ever loved anyone." He kissed her gently, a kiss full of promise and hope despite the challenges they faced. Then he left, walking back to the main house through the gathering dusk. In the guest house, Nora touched her lips, wondering how her life had changed so completely since the night she put on a silver dress and walked into a room where she was never meant to belong. For the next 2 weeks, Graham and Nora kept their distance in public, though they spoke on the phone every night after Marcus went to bed. The guest house roof was fixed, and preparations for turning the estate into a community center continued. Graham moved most of his things to the house on Maple Street, though he spent his days at the main house, working with architects and community organizers. Aunt Eugenia had retreated to her sister's home in Charleston, still threatening legal action, but finding less support than she'd expected. Many people in Willow Creek were excited about the prospect of a new community center and library. One evening, as Graham was packing the last of his personal items from his father's study, he came across an old leather journal he'd never seen before. It was tucked behind a row of legal books, as if hidden intentionally. Opening it, he recognized his father's handwriting immediately. The journal appeared to be a personal diary, something Graham had never known his father to keep. Curious, he began to read. Hours later, he was still sitting in the study, the journal open in his hands, tears streaming down his face. The entries spanned decades, revealing a side of his father Graham had never known, a man who questioned the Westwood legacy, who recognized its flaws and hoped his son would someday find a better path. The final entry, dated just weeks before his death, read, "I hired a new housekeeper today. Nora Ellis, a remarkable young woman raising a child alone while pursuing an education. There's a quiet dignity about her that reminds me of Catherine. I hope Graham will see it someday. The strength in ordinary people that outshines all our family's hollow prestige. Perhaps she'll help him find what I never could. A life of genuine purpose rather than inherited privilege." Graham sat back, stunned. His father had seen in Nora what Graham himself had taken years to recognize, and somehow, in his own quiet way, he had tried to guide Graham toward a better future. Wiping his eyes, Graham picked up his phone and called Nora. "Can you come to the main house? There's something I need to show you." When Nora arrived, Marcus, in tow because she couldn't leave him alone at night, Graham showed her the journal. "My father saw you," he said softly. "Really saw you right from the beginning. He hired you not just because you needed the job, but because he hoped you would change me." Nora read the entry, her eyes widening. "I had no idea," she whispered. "He was always kind to me, but I never thought—" "He was right," Graham said, looking from Nora to Marcus, who was exploring the study with curious eyes. "You did change me. You both did." Nora handed the journal back to him. "So what happens now?" Graham took a deep breath. "Now we stop hiding. Whatever my aunt or anyone else thinks, I want us to be together, openly, honestly. I want to help Marcus with his science projects and support you through your nursing exams. I want us to be a family." He knelt down to Marcus's level. "Hey, buddy, how would you feel about me spending more time with you and your mom? Not just as friends, but as family." Marcus looked at Graham thoughtfully. "Would you live with us in the guest house?" Graham smiled. "Actually, I was thinking maybe you and your mom might like my new house on Maple Street. It has a big backyard for playing and a room that would be perfect for a young scientist." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Really? Could I have a real science lab?" "We'll see about that," Nora cut in, trying to hide her smile. Graham stood, facing Nora. "What do you think? I know it's fast and we can take it as slowly as you need, but I don't want to pretend anymore. I love you, Nora Ellis. You and Marcus are the family I choose." Nora looked at her son, who was watching them with hopeful eyes, then back at Graham. "People will talk. Let them," Graham said firmly. "Your aunt will be furious, probably," Graham agreed with a smile. "But even she can't fight the truth forever." Nora took a step closer to him. "And what is the truth, Graham Westwood?" "The truth is that the woman in the silver dress stole my heart," Graham said softly, "and I never want it back." For a long moment, Nora said nothing. Then, with a smile that lit up her whole face, she said, "Yes." "Yes?" Graham repeated, his heart hammering. "Yes to the house on Maple Street. Yes to being a family. Yes to all of it." Graham pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his joy. Marcus clapped his hands, caught up in the moment, even if he didn't fully understand its significance. "Does this mean Graham's going to be my dad?" he asked innocently. Nora looked at Graham, a question in her eyes. "If that's something you both want someday," Graham said carefully. "For now, how about we just say I'm the guy who loves your mom? Han thinks you're the coolest kid in Willow Creek." Marcus considered this, then nodded approvingly. "That works." The transition wasn't easy. As word spread about Graham, Nora, and Marcus moving into the house on Maple Street together, the gossip flared up again. Some people cut them at the grocery store or crossed the street to avoid speaking to them. Others, to their surprise, offered congratulations and support. Charles Bentley stopped by their new home one evening with a bottle of champagne. "For the happy family," he said, seeming genuinely pleased for them. "And to let you know that some of us are coming around to the idea that Graham Westwood might actually know what he's doing for once." Dr. and Mrs. Wilson invited them to dinner, treating Nora with the same respect they showed Graham. Slowly, others followed their example. Aunt Eugenia remained a problem. She returned to Willow Creek, determined to stop the estate transfer, but Graham's lawyers had done their work well. The papers were ironclad, and with his father's journal providing evidence of his wishes for the family legacy to change, even Eugenia's legal threats eventually faded. The nursing program director, impressed by Nora's dedication and perfect grades, despite the personal challenges she faced, became one of her strongest supporters. "We need more nurses with your determination," she told Nora during her final evaluation. "This community will be lucky to have you." As for Marcus, his situation at school improved when Graham volunteered to help organize a science fair, donating equipment and bringing in speakers from the state university. Seeing Graham's genuine interest in education and his obvious affection for Marcus, many parents changed their tune. Children, taking cues from the adults around them, followed suit. 6 months after the masquerade party where it all began, the Westwood estate officially opened as the Willow Creek Community Center and Library. Graham, Nora, and Marcus stood together as Graham cut the ribbon, officially turning over the property to the town. "My father would be proud," Graham said in his short speech, "not because his name is on the building, but because it now belongs to everyone. That's a legacy worth passing on." Later that evening, as they walked through the former ballroom, now filled with books and learning areas, just as Marcus had suggested, Nora squeezed Graham's hand. "You've done something remarkable here," she said. "You've turned a symbol of exclusion into a place where everyone belongs." Graham smiled, watching Marcus explore the new science corner with excitement. "I had a good teacher, too, actually." He pulled Nora closer. "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for that stupid party invitation. The cruelest thing I ever did led to the best thing that ever happened to me." "Life's funny that way," Nora agreed. "Sometimes our worst mistakes lead us where we're meant to be." As they prepared to leave, Graham noticed a glass display case in the entrance hall. Inside was a silver dress, carefully preserved. "What's this?" he asked in surprise. The center director beamed. "Mrs. Wilson donated it. She said it's an important part of the story of this place, a symbol of change and new beginnings. Do you like it?" Graham looked at Nora, whose eyes had widened at the sight of the dress she'd borrowed for that fateful night. "I think it's perfect," Graham said softly. "Sometimes the smallest things can change everything." 1 year to the day after the masquerade party, Graham stood nervously in the garden behind the house on Maple Street. String lights twinkled in the trees, and chairs had been arranged in rows, facing a simple arch covered in flowers. Charles, serving as best man, adjusted Graham's tie. "Relax, man, she's not going to change her mind." "I know," Graham said, though his heart was racing. "I just want everything to be perfect for her." Inside the house, Nora sat at the vanity, in the bedroom she now shared with Graham, as Jasmine helped her with her hair. "You look beautiful," Jasmine said, placing the last pin. "He's going to fall in love all over again when he sees you." Nora smiled at her reflection. The woman looking back at her was a far cry from the quiet housekeeper who had tried to disappear into the background for so long. This woman stood tall, her eyes bright with confidence and happiness. There was a knock at the door, and Marcus peeked in, handsome in his little suit. "Mom, everyone's waiting. Wow, you look pretty." Nora laughed, holding out her arms to her son. "Thank you, baby. Are you ready to walk me down the aisle?" Marcus nodded solemnly. "Graham and I practiced. I know exactly what to do." Outside, the small gathering of friends waited expectantly. Dr. and Mrs. Wilson, Nora's colleagues from the hospital where she now worked as a nurse, the center director, even a few people from the old country club set who had come around to supporting Graham's new life. Aunt Eugenia was not among them. Despite a cautious invitation, she had refused to attend, still unable to accept Graham's choices. Graham had made peace with her absence, understanding that some people would never change. As the music began, Graham looked up to see Marcus walking proudly toward him, his hand guiding Nora down the aisle. She wore a simple white dress, not silver this time, but just as magical to Graham's eyes. When they reached him, Marcus solemnly placed Nora's hand in Graham's, just as they had practiced. "Take good care of my mom," he whispered, loudly enough for everyone to hear, drawing smiles and a few happy tears. "I promise," Graham whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. As they spoke their vows under the flower-covered arch, with Marcus. Standing proudly beside them as best son, Graham looked at the woman who had changed his life simply by refusing to be invisible. "1 year ago, you walked into a room wearing a silver dress, and the world shifted," he said, going off script from their planned vows. "You showed me what real dignity looks like, what real strength looks like, and most importantly, what real love looks like. I promised to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that love." Nora's eyes glistened with tears as she responded, "You invited me to a party as a joke, but I came for myself, to be seen. What I never expected was how you would see me, completely, honestly, lovingly. I promise to keep seeing you the same way every day for the rest of our lives." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Graham kissed Nora to the cheers of their friends and the excited clapping of Marcus, who couldn't wait to officially be a family. At the reception, in their backyard, Charles raised a toast. To Graham and Nora Westwood Ellis, proof that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. As they danced under the stars, Nora in Graham's arms, he whispered, "Are you happy, Mrs. Westwood Ellis?" Nora smiled, up at him, her eyes shining with love. "Happier than I ever thought possible, Mr. Westwood Ellis." From the edge of the dance floor, Marcus watched them with a contented smile. His mother was dancing with the man she loved. His new science lab was being set up in his bedroom as a wedding gift, and tomorrow they would officially be a family on paper, just as they had been in their hearts for months. Life wasn't perfect. There were still people in Willow Creek who whispered when they walked by. Aunt Eugenia still refused to acknowledge their marriage. The path forward wouldn't always be smooth. But as Graham held Nora close, as Marcus joined them on the dance floor for a family hug, they knew they had found something real in each other, something stronger than old names or legacies or social expectations. They had found home. And somewhere, in a glass case at the Willow Creek Community Center, a silver dress stood as a silent reminder that sometimes the courage to be seen exactly as you are can change not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. For Nora Ellis, who had been invisible for so long, being seen by Graham Westwood had been the beginning. For Graham, truly seeing Nora had been his salvation. And for Marcus, watching their love grow had taught him the most important lesson of all, that families come in all forms, but the best ones are built on love, respect, and the willingness to stand together, no matter what others might say. As the celebration continued around them, Graham pulled Nora close for another kiss. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "For what?" she asked, smiling up at him. "For coming to my party in that silver dress," Graham replied. "For changing everything." "Thank you for finally seeing me," Nora whispered back, "for loving us." And as the stars shone overhead and music filled the warm summer night, the woman who had once been invisible and the man who had once been blind to what mattered most held each other close, knowing that they had found in each other the greatest gift of all, the chance to be truly, completely seen and loved, exactly as they were.